sit back, think through how do we need to design our marketing materials so they actually reflect the value that we're creating, and start designing that look. And then systematize that look and make that your new go-to and your new shoot from the hip. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Bryce McNabb with McNabb Storytelling. So, talking today about putting on a good face forward and a good first impression instead of defaulting to what is safe, right? Quote unquote safe, to what is quote unquote easier, right? And to what is quote unquote more affordable, okay? Because these ideas of safe, easier, and more affordable are all a misconception of budgetary constraints, okay? So the first thing that I want to kind of get us to work through and get us to shake off is that a small budget equals low quality, right? That a low budget means that you're stuck with low quality output, that in order to get a higher quality output, you have to invest a large amount of money. Generally speaking, that statement has truth to it, right? Like if you're trying to get a great product, right, you need a highly skilled worker in order to create that great product. But oftentimes, you can shell out a lot of money for something and it still be of low quality and of low value and of low significance. And so what you need to do, though, is really where the value is in the decision making. It's in the strategy. It's in making sure that you're being very intentional and very methodical with your decisions, so that way you're not just shooting from the hip all the time. Because when we're constantly shooting from the hip, when we're creating that mass marketing approach, like marketing just becomes a checkbox that we feel like, oh, we've got to get it out. And we're never really proud of what we're doing and what it looks like, but we feel this pressure to get stuff out and to get moving. The irony of all of that is, as we're doing that, we are creatures of habit, and we are always defaulting to a habitual routine. And we are defaulting to a set look and a set style and a set system that is also falling into a set process that we've designed for ourselves. It's just our gut reaction, right? And that's how we're just cranking out a lot of stuff and we're throwing stuff out there. But because we're creatures of habit, right? And because we fall into routine, you wake up the same time most days, right? You go to bed about the same time most days. You eat your meals about the same time most days. If you seriously think about your daily routine, it is a routine. It is a pattern that you often repeat over and over and over and over again. You can try to lie to yourself and say that you're doing it differently, but that's just an extremely chaotic lifestyle. And I bet that you're trapped in a chaotic lifestyle, and that chaotic lifestyle is now habitual for you, right? Like that's how life works. You can't fight that inherent truth. So, hold on, coffee. So when we're creating and we're making bad decisions about our marketing materials, we're putting out stuff that we're not proud of, that we don't like, then that means what we're putting out, instead of just defaulting to a habitual decision every single time, why don't we just stop putting stuff out for a couple weeks or maybe even a month and think very carefully about what we want that look to be? Is that look actually reflecting the essence of our organization? Is it supporting that foundation that is necessary to build relationships with fundraising or with potential prospects and customers? Or is it actually hurting that foundation and making our fundraiser and our sales team's job that much harder in order to start cultivating that relationship, right? It needs to be the job of marketing to basically be a blitzkrieg, to start like going in specifically into a specific region and just bombarding that region with good quality, engaging content that starts to build an affection for that target audience, for your brand, kind of tilling the soil a little bit, so that way when you actually send your people your on-the-ground people into that area, building those relationships is a lot easier for them, right? Like that's how it should work in conjunction. It should not work as we're throwing out a lot of crap that is boring, that no one cares about, and then when the salesperson gets there, well, first off, they probably have either ignored your ads because it was so boring that they didn't even pay attention to them, or they've seen them, they just now have a negative association with your company because of the creative that you're putting out. Therefore, it's making the salesperson's job that much harder. Like, do you understand how embarrassing it is if a salesperson or a fundraiser has to apologize for the content that the organization is putting out and be like, yeah, but we're better. When you actually start to deal with us, we're better than that, right? Like that puts a weird relationship between the sales and marketing, and it's almost like an antagonistic relationship. They should be symbiotic. What's working on the floor should be what we're crafting in the digital space, so that way it makes their jobs easier. Like we're part of the same unit here. So the myth of low quality or low budget equals low quality is continuously perpetuated because we're just defaulting to what we currently believe in this moment is easy and can get done. And so we're not doing that deep thought into thinking of how can we facilitate that engagement and basically grease it up, like reduce as much friction as possible to that engagement with what we're putting out. How do we go ahead and already establish those emotional feelings and that emotional sentiment so that way when the sales team arrives, it's easier for them, okay? So I think this is kind of getting at the crux of what I believe the goal for marketing should be and the goal for branding should be, is to cultivate that emotional sentiment. Because inherently, what we believe to be valuable is what we appreciate. You have to understand that value is inextricably tied with your feelings and your emotions. That what you perceive to what is valuable is what we perceive to be valuable. So something that is helpful, right, is something that is valuable, and something that improves my situation, right, is something that I find to be valuable. But these evaluations of what is valuable are based on my current predicament and my current situation. This is not a complete across the board statement, because there is an inherent objective value in things, right? Like a hammer, okay? If I can. A hammer and the design of a hammer is valuable. This is a valuable design. It provides value and utility based upon its actual design. So there is an objective utility to this tool because obviously it's designed to smash things into other things, right? Like it's designed to smash a wedge into a piece of material. But when you actually go and try to sell a hammer, what distinguishes one hammer from one company from another hammer of another company now is the perception of value add to that customer, right? If there is only one choice, there's no decision. When you've got multiple different offers, now what's competing against themselves is not necessarily the product construction. Oftentimes, it's how that object itself is marketed to that person, right? I mean, you can do better materials and everything, but essentially, there's a threshold of good enough, right? And once your product, service, offering has met that threshold of good enough, beyond that threshold of good enough is the strength of the emotional connection that's being built. Because if your product sucks and if your service sucks, people will know about it very quickly. You're not going to be in business very long if you're making bad products and you're providing a bad service. Especially today, it's going to go through the ether very quickly. You'll get canceled, right? Like the market is very quick to judge nowadays. So the expectation, the bar is semi-high, but once you reach that threshold of good enough, beyond that, it's dependent upon the emotional affection. Now it's dependent upon my emotional perception of the value that this thing now adds. And that is dictated by my situation, right? Like it's dictated by my problem. What I mean by that is the severity of the problem that I have, right, reflects upon how much I value the worth of that solution. Okay? So value is just if this thing is solving a problem, right? If my problem is like so painful, then now this is the delta of emotional value that this object has. If there is no problem, it has no emotional value to me. Does that make sense? Like there's no emotional value to something if you are not facing a problem or a situation or a lack that you feel like this object or this service is going to then fulfill for you. Long-winded way of saying you got to make stuff that's going to get people emotionally engaged. And so what you need to do then is step back and start thinking through, like, how do we craft that emotional engagement inside of our content, right? And that just takes a little bit of thought work, just to tap the brakes a little bit, because if we're just defaulting to throwing out content, do what's quick and easy, just get stuff out there so we're in front of people's face, right? It's like showing up to church after you've rolled around outside and you've ripped your shirt. And you're doing that every single Sunday. Okay? What is the perception of the people in that room towards you if that's how you're showing up every single Sunday? But, Monday through Saturday, you're cleaned up and you're wearing great looking stuff. But every time they see you, you've rolled in dirt and you ripped your shirt, right? What is their perception of you at this moment? It's the same thing we're risking to our company and to our brand, which is your company's reputation, your visible face that you're putting out there. It's the same thing you're risking when you're putting out content that is in dissonance with your actual brand narrative. And so when I'm saying brand narrative, I don't necessarily mean the overall story that you're trying to tell. I mean the feeling that you're trying to communicate. And it's that feeling that you're trying to put at scale that's established between your customer and your organization. And that feeling of affection is either through that sales engagement or through their experience with your products, if this is specifically just a product-based business, right? You're trying to amplify that affection and enhance that affection. So if you're putting out stuff that makes you look ridiculous or it doesn't actually reinforce that feeling, if it doesn't actually produce good feelings in other people, but you're doing it because you feel pressured, because you feel like you actually have to be putting this stuff out all the time, you're better off not doing it, because you're just going to look like a crazy person showing up to an event. And that's how you look. And that's how you're going to get judged. And so this is where I disagree with Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't really think it's useful or valuable at all to throw out low quality content, right? If that low quality content is putting a negative, is devaluing, in essence, the value that your organization is actually providing. You're now creating a bit of a dissonance. And so it doesn't matter how good your website is because no one's going to your website anyways. People don't go to websites anymore. They're not hanging out there. Where are we on? We're on platforms. You test this. Get your phone out and you go, if you've got an iPhone, it'll tell you how much time you spend per week on your iPhone. So per day, per week, it'll tell you those stats. And then you can actually look at what are the top apps that you're using on your iPhone. And I bet you're spending probably like 2 to 4 hours every day on your phone, and you're using social media. That's where you're hanging out. Okay, so the majority of that time, the time you're spending every day is social media. You're on platforms. We don't go to websites anymore. So the only time someone's going to see you outside of your current client and current customer base is on those platforms. So we have to put a face forward that actually matches what that's doing. And you can actually do that if you don't have a big budget to spend, right? It just requires taking a bit of effort to think through, how do I actually want to present myself? And basically prototype it. So treat your marketing like it's product design, okay? If your product sucks, right, and we'll go back to this threshold of good enough, you need to bring your marketing up to that threshold of good enough. Because if your product sucks, it gets rejected. And going back to like what I said earlier, it gets canceled. People ignore it. People don't care about it. So if that's true with products and services, how is that at all any different with marketing material? We're faced with waves upon waves upon waves of content every single day. It's what people call noise, right? And so this is the benefit, and this is the opportunity that we have, is because the majority of people are shooting from the hip and creating a lot of noise. They're not thinking deeply about what is the emotion that I want to create? How do I make sure that my creative supports and reinforces that emotion? And they don't look at their product, they don't look at their marketing as a product. So my challenge to you is to start prototyping your marketing. Think about your marketing as product design. And take a moment, just take a month off. Stop putting out social media stuff and take a moment to strategize, right? How do you need to design these pieces of content? Like, if you don't like what you're looking at, what would you like it to look like? What do you feel like it should look like? And just take a moment to then decide that. And then when you've decided that, templatize it. Because this is the thing, you're already operating off of a template. It's just a knee-jerk reaction of how you feel like you should be designing this stuff. You're already operating off of a template. You're already operating off of a content production process. It's just subconscious in the background and not recognized as a process. And it's not recognized as a template because we're not acknowledging that it is a routine and a habit that we're getting into. So it's that framework that is the problem. It's not our budget, it's that framework that we're operating off of that's the problem. What we need to create is a new framework that we operate from. A new creative strategy, a new content production system, right? To make sure that we're outputting quality content every single time. So that way we're not showing up looking like a disaster when in reality, we're crushing it in every other engagement that we have, right? So prototype, like sit back, think through how do we need to design our marketing materials so they actually reflect the value that we're creating and start designing that look. And then systematize that look and make that your new go-to and your new shoot from the hip. And then once you've spent just a bit of time and effort into solidifying that idea, then go forward and start putting stuff out at mass scale because now you're showing up appropriately. Now you're showing up and you look great. Now you're showing up and you look respectable. People are now seeing and evaluating you differently, because it's actually a more appropriate evaluation now. All right. Hope that was helpful. Just remember, once you hit the threshold of good enough, your market value is then dependent upon your marketing, right? And that value is inextricably tied to feeling, and therefore we need our marketing materials to communicate the feeling that we want our customers to have about our organization, so that way they get and they feel that value that we provide to them. So hope this was helpful. If you guys have any questions, you can find me at McNabb_storytelling on Instagram, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.